who are on the West Coast. I'm Samantha Salt, Communications Director for USA-ITA, and we're here today for our webinar titled Paying the Price for Non-Compliance. We're so pleased to have one of our newest associate members on the line, ecVision, and Gary Barraco from ecVision will be presenting today's webinar. For those of you who have not done one of our webinars before, just a few housekeeping items. We will be sending out this presentation later this afternoon to all of you who registered. You'll receive this presentation as well as the audio recording of the entire call. We will also answer questions at the end of the call. If at any time during the presentation you have a question, you can go ahead and send us a chat message, and we'll get those questions in the queue. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Gary.
Okay, great. Thanks, Samantha. And I'd like to thank the team at USA-ITA for facilitating the webinar for us. And we hope that this is the first of many educational and informative presentations that we could do. We had a great response in registrations from all of the members at USA-ITA. So I know that the information is timely. I think it's of great concern to just about everyone. As Samantha said, my name is Gary Barraco. I'm with ecVision. We're a software platform provider, and we're working with major brands and retailers and manufacturers. And the concept of the presentation really stems from a discussion that I had a few months ago with someone from a major retail organization. And we were at an event, and we were talking about whether it's cheaper to actually be non-compliant or to be compliant. And so we were sitting there, and we were adding up the costs of each of these categories. So, you know, if I only get dinged with one fine, you know, is that cheaper than having to actually be compliant? But realistically, non-compliance reverberates all the way across the enterprise. And it doesn't just hit an organization once, but it hits you many times in the pocketbook. So we're going to go through and talk about some of the costs that are associated to non-compliance. But before we start, I want to talk about the compliance landscape. There's been a dramatic rise in product recalls and injuries, and it's caused by either design or manufacturing defects. And this has resulted in new standards and regulations all around the globe to help ensure the safety of apparel and footwear products, or let's say the consumers of apparel and footwear products. The new standards and regulations are accompanied by stringent requirements for testing, supply chain accountability, traceability, and record keeping, which is all burdening manufacturers and importers. And the risks that involve product safety and compliance can be unremitting, and the cost of missing the mark can be in the range of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And there's numerous and continued violations that have resulted in fines and levies. When we talk about the regulatory scenario, we can talk about first children's product safety as its own category, and that is the United States Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act. But then also we have to look at all of the other states that have gotten on board. So Washington, Maine, Illinois, and I'm sure there's more on the way that have their own product safety acts that they're working with. Then there's product chemistry bans and prohibitions, the exposure limits to lead in Prop 65 in California, all of the labeling and reporting requirements. In the European Union, you've got REACH, California Green Chemistry, conflict minerals, and this is something that has really kind of overturned the apple cart in the marketplace. I don't know that anyone is quite ready for it in the apparel and footwear space, even though the electronics industry and other industry verticals have been doing it for a while. And then what's on the horizon, something called the family right to know. And that's similar to a chemical traceability study that's coming out. Now, what's interesting enough is that since 2008, when the Consumer Product Safety Commission actually enacted the Improvement Act, there's been an incredible rise in the number of regulated products. So looking at this chart, we see that in 2008 there were about 866 CPSC regulated products. And each year that's gone up incrementally. I can't explain what happened in 2011 except, we might consider that, there might have been some government setback. But ultimately in 2012 there were well over 2,000 CPSC regulated products. Now, when you look into the number of government agencies that have added their 2 cents to the way goods are imported and sold in the United States, for instance, this pair of ladies' shoes, you can understand why retailers and brands are overwhelmed with the regulatory pressures. What you're seeing in this graphic is all of those government agencies that have had their hand in affecting the way that pair of shoes is brought to market and sold within the United States. Then you add all those individual state regulations that are compounding the restrictions of the U.S. government. And even when you're doing business in other countries, there's additional regulations that are layered on to increase the complexity of manufacturing and selling apparel and footwear. Like I said, the regulatory directives don't only apply to U.S. imports, but there are new and changing codes that apply to many countries, some that I have represented here. So if you're a manufacturer, retailer, or brand that sells into more than one country, which most do today, especially with the spread of e-commerce, you need to take into consideration each country-specific regulation and ensure that your product meets all of those standards. Now, while there's numerous instances in the apparel and footwear industry where I can point to illustrate how brand reputation has been ruined, and you can't really affix a dollar sign to the value of a brand's reputation. But with this aside, there are measurable costs that can be calculated when a brand fails. Aside from the government and state regulations that, if not followed, can lead to high fines, blocked sales, and costly recalls. As a retailer, you also need to be concerned about consumers and NGOs that are targeting you because you don't have a good social, labor, or environmental due diligence or traceability program. Now, granted, some of this is warranted, but not all of it. And with the social media outlets, it could take only minutes to trash a brand's reputation. Retailers are also operating in an environment of increasing complexity, and with these ever-changing regulatory constraints, managing trade regulations can be incredibly complex, especially in the apparel industry where there are other variables that kind of contribute to that situation. For instance, the higher number of countries that are involved in the international sourcing and distribution channels. And as you add each new country of origin and destination to your organization's portfolio, that could mean the addition of regulations and compliance requirements that also have to be met. So in order to produce reliable, high-quality products that loyal consumers expect from you, it's imperative as a manufacturer, retailer, importer, and distributor that you proactively evaluate all of the textiles, trim, and components that are parts of your products in order to ensure that you're producing goods utilizing materials that meet all of the above regulations, whether they be U.S. state, or foreign country. You also need to document all the activities that are related to product safety compliance based on the global regulations. And you need to, at times, provide consumer-facing systems like websites or portals to trace raw material components and production facility information so that the consumer can gather as much information about where that item was produced. Cost and risk are the major concerns for product safety compliance. Now, there are typically 9 cost components that I can associate with product compliance failure. And I'm going to talk through each of these 9 and give you some examples. But they fall into 3 main categories. The first is lost revenue. The second is the short-term, I call crisis mode type costs. And the third is that long-term capability building cost that you need to put into your organization. So let's look at the 9 costs, starting with cost number 1. This is the simplest to understand. Lost revenue from products taken off the market. If you have no product to sell, obviously you're not going to make any money. Cost 2. You've got lost revenue from interruption of your supply chain production and or a missed opportunity to launch a product as expected. So stopping the production lines. When a manufacturer needs to remake a product, it'll certainly hold up your future orders. But then what happens when the non-compliant product doesn't reach the market in time for a timely launch, such as holiday season, back to school, or even misses the in-store date that's advertised by the marketing team? This affects more than just the compliance or sourcing team. This can be felt, and that's that repercussion that I talked about that can be felt all across the organization. Cost number 3, fines and fees that are associated with product safety failure. These include regulatory fines, customer penalties and other fees, and then include those arising from lawsuits and public relations services if you need to get yourself out of trouble. Just last month at a trade organization meeting in California, I listened to a speaker, and they had tallied up the number of lawsuits and the corresponding payouts made just for Prop 65 labeling claims in the last year. It totaled into the millions already. And a funny thing was that most of these claims were filed by 3 or 4 law firms just out to make fast cash from the retailer. Cost number 4, design, requalification, and testing that's required to fix a non-compliant product. Now this could include revamping of the design, retooling of production facilities, and all of the requalification and reliability testing of any new materials and finished goods. So non-compliance really sends your design and production teams back to the drawing board. How can the product be designed to maintain standards? Or did the non-compliance happen in the production process where the product strayed? Then once you've fixed the root cause, you have to revamp and retest. Not just the product, the finished good itself, but also all of the new materials that are components. Cost 5, replacing non-compliant units that are already in the inventory. Now, footwear and apparel brands typically have to scrap these units since they can't be sold as is or reworked. I mean, you can't take a shoe, send it back to the factory, and replace the sole. I don't think it's going to happen that way. Then you've got to consider all of the shipping costs that have to be included in cost number 5. The bad goods are somewhere in your supply chain or all throughout. You need a means to find out where and come up with a plan to get them pulled back. Or can you trust that they've been destroyed, or do you really need to implement a system to track their appropriate disposal? You can't just throw non-compliant goods into a dumpster or just allow the retailer to scrap them at their level. How can you be sure that they're not still going to hit the market in somewhere else? Cost number 6. Now you need to address all of the non-compliant units that are in production. You need to scrap any non-compliant components under finished goods and then transition to existing suppliers or identify and wrap up new ones. Okay, so now do you still have product in the pipeline? Likely you do. Which components need to be trashed or replaced? Do I need to source new suppliers? And then do I need to test the raw materials? Cost number 7, data collection, documentation, and reporting that's required by the regulations to track and ensure product compliance internally, and ultimately provide evidence that the product is compliant. So this is where we're seeing the other side of the coin. Well, is it easier to be compliant or non-compliant? Well, the verification in cost number 7 involves collecting the relevant material content data from all of the suppliers, whether they be Tier 2, Tier 3, or below, and performing a required analysis and documentation at the raw material and then rolling that up into the product level. This is something that we see evident in conflict minerals management. The cost of this effort will increase if internal and external supply chain members need to be educated about what data needs to be collected and how it's to be reported, which again is something that we're seeing through conflict minerals and the new SEC ruling. This is a new rule for our suppliers and for everyone within the supply chain, so the education process needs to begin. Cost number 8. Now you need to look at some short-term process and organization changes to actually take corrective action. So you've identified some non-compliant product, you know where it exists within your supply chain, and you need to fix it. So for example, teams and processes may need to be formed to fill the gaps in the current supplier declaration or collection, validation, and documentation process, just to fill the gaps temporarily. And these costs are maybe increased because the company's generally operating in that crisis mode that I mentioned, which in turn leads to expediting costs and higher labor costs. And the organization could also experience errors as employees and the supply chain and each link within the supply chain learn about the new processes. And last but not least, we have to look at the long-term process and the organization after the immediate crisis. This could include any enterprise-wide changes that solidify a long-term shift to prevent future failures. So how can we avoid these costly mistakes in the future, and what systems should we put in place to insulate ourselves against them? So these are the 9 costs. And you could feel free to ask some questions throughout, and we'll pick them up at the end of the call. But ultimately, as you can see, the cost of failure is exponentially higher than any solution that could assist with product management. But still, we're seeing that organizations are reluctant to invest in technology to avert potential disaster. Recognizing that the regulatory environment continues to increase in complexity, leading brands and retailers have started to move away from the manual-based methods for compliance, and they're deploying technology to centralize and manage the full range of compliance activities. We're also seeing that retailers and manufacturers need to focus on legitimately collaborating with the supplier network to manage risk on all levels in order to avoid those costly fines, delays in production and shipping, or lawsuits from customers. Someone asked me, well, what do you mean by legitimately collaborating? And in this sense, you know, the age-old means of us kind of pushing the supply chain, you know, holding your suppliers under your thumb really won't work anymore. You need to legitimately collaborate, and that means to open the lines of communication so that it's 2 ways. Now, even if you're using external testing company platforms or a homegrown or legacy system, or even if you're still on Excel spreadsheets, all of the data is scattered, and it's not integrated into the primary supply chain management solution. That's where cloud-based technology platforms can provide real-time visibility, workflow, and management by exception tools that are a simplified way to holistically manage product safety and facility compliance. By adopting this type of solution, brands and manufacturers can consolidate information about product testing and factory compliance from multiple systems, whether they be in an ERP or the third-party testing company's platform or in an Excel spreadsheet, consolidating that information into a single source. You can collaborate with external parties, whether they be suppliers or these third-party testing or audit companies, for test execution and monitoring. This type of compliance solution also streamlines communications throughout all of the processes that are involved. And it allows the user to generate reports, and you can monitor the processes and demonstrate due diligence and traceability. So you can do your own internal monitoring before the government asks you for a due diligence report. It also provides real-time data management and decision support to ensure that senior management receives accurate information on the root causes, what the financial impacts are, and how to mitigate actions to control risk in the future. So what I've talked about was the 9 costs and how they all really vary. And it's no different than, if you think that you received a speeding ticket once, that it's not going to come back and haunt you. So next time you renew your insurance, especially in the state of New Jersey, you might get some additional fines or some surcharges. So thinking that you can be non-compliant without paying the cost really won't work. So with that, I'd like to take any questions that we might have.
Thanks, Gary.
So I'll pass it back to you, Samantha.
Sounds good. If anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and send it to us by chat, and we'll answer those in the order in which we receive them. You can also raise your hand and we can put you on the air. So our first question is, does your company, ecVision, have a solution to help my company manage these conflict minerals issues?
Yep. So as I mentioned, we've been getting incredible reaction from our existing customers and prospects when it comes down to conflict minerals. The way we use ecVision Suite and our collaborative platform to manage the conflict minerals is in 3 different ways. First of all, we have a document sharing portal, which is similar to a vendor portal, maybe kind of the vendor portal of the old days, but we've now moved that to the cloud. And you can share out all of your vendor compliance documents. Why it's different than that type of vendor portal you might have seen a few years ago is that within ecVision, we can start discussions around those documents, and that's all centralized within the system. And also, it allows the brand or the manufacturer to require the supplier to electronically sign off or acknowledge that they've received that document. The next is the due diligence survey. So right now, everyone's operating on the OECD or the EICC survey form, the Excel spreadsheet. And I don't know that we're going to get away from that anytime soon, but it seems to work. So by distributing that Excel spreadsheet for suppliers to actually reach down through their purchasing organization to determine if any of the conflict minerals, the 3 TGs, exist within the components or within the production facility itself, you still need to use that EICC form. And then the last piece of the puzzle that we include in ecVision's collaborative platform is the ability to then capture that information from the EICC form and to house that within our system. That's that consolidated platform, single solution that centralizes all of the information. Once you have all of the conflict mineral management information within the platform, you can then see where that is used, where those components or those facilities that are non-conflict free are used throughout your product. And then that would allow you to provide provide those reports to the SEC next year. But conflict minerals, again, is a complex piece right now. Any other questions coming in?
Another question is, how does this system differ from SharePoint?
The system that we provide actually is a modular system that is end-to-end. It is unique to supply chain management. And actually, we've been focused in the apparel and footwear space for the last 15 years. So we are unique and specialized within this area. The modules that we offer range from design to delivery, anything from PDM to PLM, supply chain management, supply chain execution. And an organization can start out with 1 or 2 of these modules or just a single module. And while the collaborative aspect is similar to what SharePoint offers, what we're doing is housing all of the detailed information, whether it be purchase orders, BOM level details, product masters, supplier masters. So we're taking data across the entire enterprise, supply chain enterprise, and putting that all together and allowing the brand to share that within a role-based solution.
We have a couple questions about the presentation. Yes, everybody will receive a PDF of this presentation as well as the full audio today, so you can go back and review that or send that to your colleagues.
Yep. So the one thing I do have to apologize, when we create a PDF, you lose all of that fun animation, and some of the slides are layered with animation. So if you wanted to reach out to Samantha or the folks at USA-ITA, I could break them out for you if you really wanted to reuse them. I know sometimes internally you like to share them with your team and you'd like them to get the full effect. So, but because of the size of the presentation, it wouldn't be feasible to send it as a PPT. So.
Yeah, the animations were great. I loved those. Sophia, I've unmuted your line if you have a question. Nope.
Come on, we love when a student raises their hand, Sophia.
Maybe not.
Okay, great.
Any further questions? You can go ahead and send us a chat message or raise your hand.
It could also be if you don't have a question, but if you also wanted to share some element of best practice that you've found that works with at your organization, anything along those lines too.
And we do have some questions about the cost of your system, which I don't know if you want to talk about on the air, or perhaps we can connect you with those questioners afterwards.
Yeah, we'll connect with those folks afterwards. But what we offer is we have a range of products. Some are for small to medium businesses, and then others are for larger enterprise organizations. It is a subscription cost, and based on the number of users and what functionality you're looking for. But we'll get back to you guys one-on-one on that.
Yes, and we'll send out Gary's contact information as well if you want to follow up with him directly.
Sure.
And just to clarify, this is a web-based system that you have, correct?
Yes, it's totally web-based and different than what was originally a hosted solution. So ecVision started 15 years ago as an EDI provider, and while we still have a huge base of customers that do regular EDI with us, we moved quickly to hosted solutions and online solutions, and then 2 years ago we made a concerted effort to move everything to the cloud. And the difference is that with a cloud platform, ecVision takes care of all of the technical management that goes behind a hosted solution. So users can log in. We actually have 5 data centers throughout the world now for greater flexibility and for response time, whether you have suppliers in Asia or you're logging in from the United States. So we manage all of the infrastructure as a cloud-based solution.
Another question, does your system allow direct filing with CBP?
Yes, it does. And this is something that's coming up now. So we enable the brand's manufacturers to do direct filing for their 10+2 documents to U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. And now with the new proposed regulation that's coming out for 16 CFR 1110 and filing of certificates of compliance, once that is in place and CBP is ready to start receiving GCCs or COCs, CPCs, whatever term you want to call them, and in the new proposed regulation, they're actually changing those names too. You'll be able to electronically attach a PDF of a certificate to accompany your 10+2 documents. We're also building the capability to electronically file under the terms that CBP is looking for in CPSC, where you can just provide a web link to an online portal so that the Customs and Border Patrol can actually look at that web link and view all of the certificates of compliance that accompany each of your orders. So that's a great question, especially as we move into, you know, again, I keep saying that this is an ever-changing scenario, and I think that if you're keyed into everything that the trade organizations like USA-ITA are doing, you'll see that every day there's a new update coming about trade regulations.
And we have some people on the line from various trade promotion entities around the world, including Colombia and some others. And we have some questions. Is this something that maybe do you have a product for vendors? Is this something that, you know, international suppliers might be able to use?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, we have some international customers that use us at all different levels. So as a supplier, it's also important that you're compliant as a wholesaler. You're selling to your customers. And so as I mentioned before, we have different levels of platforms based on the size of your organization and how much functionality, configuration you really need. So we have a lot of different products in the compliance space that we can offer that really are tailored to the size of the organization and what you're doing.
Great. Any last questions? And again, we'll definitely send out contact information for Gary and his team at ecVision if you want to reach out to him individually.
Yeah. And if you want to reach out and just talk about thought leadership issues, I mean, if you want to, you know, say, well, what do you think about this? And this is the process that I have, you know, whether it be me or the folks on our team here from the product, we'd love to share our business expertise and just open up the dialogue and conversation with the USA-ITA members. You know, even if it isn't just, well, I'm interested in buying your solution right now, we'd love to open the lines of discussion with you.
Great.
All right. Thanks again for attending, everybody. We're glad that we had such a good response, and I'm sure we'll be programming more of these in the future. It's one thing if you feel that conflict minerals is another area that you might want us to talk more about and how we manage conflict minerals. We could dig deeper into our solutions in that area, especially since it's time sensitive. But you can send an email over to Samantha and the events team at USA-ITA, and we'd be glad to do that with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Gary. Great presentation, and thank you to all of you on the line. And before I let you go, while I have a captive audience, just want to give a quick plug for our upcoming event on June 19th. This event will take place in New York City, and we will have some great presentations with speakers from U.S. Customs, Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. We'll also be talking about compliance as it relates to Bangladesh and some other important issues going on right now. So encourage you all to visit our website and check that out, as well as upcoming events. And thank you again to Gary and the ecVision team, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you. And if you do go to the event in New York on the 19th, you'll be able to meet us there.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Samantha. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.